Greetings everyone. Welcome to the series on inequality and difference. The topic of today's lecture is technology, well-being and inequality. Inequalities have always been central to several subjects like psychology, sociology, economics, history, and other related fields like the social policy or gender studies, race studies, as well as human geography. In spite of several poverty reduction efforts since the late 1990s, where 80% of extreme poor in Asia Pacific were lifted from extreme poverty conditions by 2015, rising inequality, however, still remains a great cause of concern among social scientists as well as policy makers. The recent COVID pandemic has revealed the pre-existing inequalities and has further exacerbated the inequalities that already existed for the poor and the marginalized. As a result, the gap between the haves and the have-nots has further increased. Now, if we talk about impact of COVID-19 on several vulnerable groups, then we can clearly say that the state of development goals, meeting development goals as well as achievement of or attainment of human rights has further deteriorated, and certain facts that can be stated are that though 80% of extreme poor in Asia Pacific were lifted out of poverty by 2015, the rising inequality still remains a cause of concern, and there has been a very high level of informalization of labor and employment, which is quite a worrying trend. 60% are not covered by any social protection and 40% of population has no access to health care. And if we talk about the COVID impact, it's now projected that the GDP growth slumped or will be negative for 2020-21 for several countries, and this is likely to further affect the poor and the informal sector much more than others. Income inequality during COVID has further risen. Globally, about 500 million more people could be pushed into poverty post-pandemic, and several technical companies like Facebook, Amazon, etc., Microsoft, they are expected to make $46 million more profit in 2021 than they could before the pandemic. So again, the divide between the rich and the poor has been increasing. The causes of inequality among the rich and the poor countries are also rooted in the extortive financial system in the entire world economy, and billions of US dollars are being spent annually by the global south for public external debt payments to bilateral and multilateral lenders such as the World Bank and IMF, private banks, speculators, etc. And several countries cannot spend on food and relief during pandemic due to this kind of a system that is prevalent. Now, coming to the basic definitions of inequality, since that is going to be the major theme of today's lecture, inequality is the difference in social status, wealth or opportunity between people or groups. Here one must also mention inequality of outcome, which basically means economic inequality in income and wealth. Then there is inequality in opportunities, which refers to unequal access to essential services. Inequality of impacts, which means a differentiated and asymmetric impact from environmental hazards. So, for example, not everyone is impacted in the same way from environmental hazards like global warming or earthquakes or flooding. The poor and the marginalized are definitely more vulnerable to the severe after effects. Then another very important kind of inequality, and which is all pervasive, is digital inequality. Internet has changed the world faster than any previous technology, and in less than 2-3 decades, more than 40% of the world's population has gone online. And if we look at recent trends, then some of the world's most impoverished households also have acquired a mobile phone, even if they do not have access to running water or toilet. So, digital technologies have created new forms of participation and inclusion. They can improve the efficiency of organizational as well as administrative procedures and provide diverse possibilities for creativity, innovation, earning a livelihood, and digitization long ago became in fact a new source of cultural capital also. And this again has increased inequality at this level. Now, if we talk about the importance of creating a learning society, then the beginnings were made around 1800 CE for Western economies and more recently for those in Asia. And a far greater impact on the human well-being also has been seen as a result of several improvements in allocative efficiency or resource accumulation as well as distribution. For several hundreds of years, standards of living had remained almost unchanged, and also the lifestyle had remained almost unchanged, but post 1800 CE, especially with the onset of industrial revolution, things began to change, and one can see a constant rise in the living standards, as you can see from this graph that is being shared on the screen, that how there has been a rise in the living standards. The real wages of London craftsmen, if you compare from 1200 to 2000, definitely show a rising trend, as you can see from this graph. And there were several improvements that were made in life expectancy as well since 1820, and again the graph shows a rising trend. Now, a question that arises here is that what caused this massive change? So, one important reason was of course the Enlightenment, which brought about a change in mindset. It encouraged a questioning mentality. It gave confidence to people to question the authority and also to recognize that change was possible as well as inevitable. Then reassessment of how we know truth and how we organize and run society as well as government. So, these were some of the important prime movers, and the most important one was of course the scientific method, which provided a systematic way of figuring out how to improve productivity and getting more outputs from a given scheme of things or resources. And this again can be associated with the Industrial Revolution, with the coming of factories, as well as with the rising population, which resulted in rising demand for goods. The social organization, that means the rule of law, new institutions, they allowed cooperation among larger numbers of people, thereby increasing the extent of the market, and a key role was definitely played in this by research as well as several educational institutions. However, there is also a concern for future. So, while technology is something that one must look forward to, but as one is talking about labor replacing robots, then there is a question that needs to be answered, that will this not further increase inequality and unemployment in a country like India? Machines have long been stronger than humans and better able to do several physical jobs in lesser amount of time. Computers are even better at processing large amounts of information, and artificial intelligence means that robots may even be better at learning and delivering various tasks. So, the extent to which they can replace or outperform humans in immediate future, however, is uncertain, and there are different estimates that are being made. But a question that arises is that if they replace human labor, then the demand of labor will further be reduced, and the real wages of workers, especially poor, unskilled workers, which fall in the category of marginalized sections of society, will further fall. Overall, the share of labor is decreasing. Firms are choosing technology that can replace human labor, and also there is now a lot of focus on resource saving schemes, and this is not only leading to rising unemployment, but at the same time increasing inequality. So, what is the alternative to this? With appropriate government actions, there can be a more productive innovation, which can ensure that innovation also leads to equality in society. So, therefore, there is a need to redirect innovation in this direction. So, innovation could be labor augmenting, okay, and also increasing productivities at the same time. But of course, this can be done only if the concern of the marginalized and the poor are kept in mind. Innovation could be more directed at addressing major problems like global warming, climate change, and so many climatic catastrophes that keep on happening from time to time due to human greed. Better climate regulations and also keeping a tab on the carbon footprint can go a long way. There must be an attempt to limit monopolies and also to give a shape to innovation process which is more human and which can lead to equity. So, basically there is a need to ensure that everyone benefits from innovation, and innovation makes society more productive as well. Progressive taxation can ensure that the technology companies pay tax and the rich individuals are not able to evade taxes, so that the poor and the marginalized can benefit from the taxes that would be collected by the government. Then another very important factor is the IPR, intellectual property rights, that ensure the that should ensure better sharing of the benefits of innovation rather than capitalization of such innovations to benefit only a few powerful individuals or firms. So, underlying most advances or progress is basic research that should be financed by the government, and it should be ensured that the benefits of such research reach the masses as well. Education can play a key role in this entire process, taking advantage of modern technology to reach more individuals as well as to provide them with a better education experience, which is also job oriented. So, there is a need to go back to the welfare state model, where the economy must evolve towards service sector economy also, rather than only gearing to the needs and requirements of the big business. And education, health and other public services must be taken care of, and investments must rise in these sectors if we have to bring about equality. If we value those services highly and pay good wages, good working conditions, and sufficient numbers of jobs are created, then definitely income inequality can be dealt with. There is also a need that the workers who have been replaced by machines should be provided some alternatives, because if the workers who have been working and if they have been replaced due to coming of machines or robots, then some alternative channels of their employment and harnessing their potential must be explored. Markets only on their own can't manage structural transformations. So, for those who are going to lose jobs due to technological changes, etc., will not have investments to make changes or to learn new skills or to enhance their skills. So, this is something that must be taken care of by the state. So, there is a need for a reinvigorated 21st century welfare state, and something which goes beyond social protection, and it includes making investments, specific investments in people and places where they don't have the resources to make those investments themselves, because people do not have even 2 square meals to eat in a day. So, from where are they going to garner those resources to reskill or upskill themselves? So, there is a need to recognize importance of imperfections of capital markets and to ensure that kind of innovation which results in shared prosperity. So, the most important observation that one can make is the concept of shared prosperity rather than prosperity that is enjoyed only by a few stakeholders. Now, coming to the issue of digital divide, it is an economic and social inequality with regard to access to, use or impact of ICT, and the divide within countries refers to inequalities among individuals, households, businesses, or even spatially, that is in different geographical regions. And all this also includes socio-economic categories, different demographic categories, and for example, there is a digital divide between rich and poor. The digital divide is also among different races, then different genders in terms of computer usage, and the divide between different countries or regions of the world is referred to as global digital divide. So, this inequality related to ICT is both inter-country as well as intra-country, and it refers to the difference between people who have easier access to internet as compared to those who do not have, and a lack of access is believed to be a disadvantage to those because the digital divide also increases the huge knowledge divide, and there is a plethora of knowledge that is available online that can be made use of by those who have access to it. And there are differences between the rural as well as urban internet access. Then there are socio-economic differences between people of belonging to different groups, as well as differences among developed, developing and emerging economies in terms of availability of internet as well as cost of internet. Now, coming to the situation in India, India's fast economic growth of past several years could not be sustained if we do not bridge the digital divide. And the 2016 Global Information Technology Report for the World Economic Forum placed India 91 in its Networked Readiness Index that ranked 139 countries. So, out of 139 countries, India's position was 91. And while India has moved up a lot, if we consider this criteria, it still lags behind almost half of the countries that were included in the index. So, there is a need for the right strategies to be put in place to bridge the digital divide, which could erode the country's which could enhance the country's global competitiveness, and that would also enhance the societal benefits of ICT. The ICT must not just be for the urbans, but also for rubans, which is a term which means rural urbans, a new breed of rural population with talent, spirit, aspiration as compared to the urban inhabitants. A number of reasons can be ascribed for this prevalent digital divide. For example, race, gender, geographical location, awareness, political, cultural, psychological factors, and the World Bank had predicted that a 10% increase in mobile phone technology coverage amongst the population of emerging markets would lead to an additional 1.2% increase in annual economic growth. This again requires that we must consider what are the limits and how the limits of accessibility and cultural and geographical factors can be dealt with. Digitization emphasizes, however, that inequality and disadvantages that were suffered by specific population groups must not continue, and on a global scale, the digital footprint of industrialized nations, including access, scope of use and organization of digital content and product, however, has totally increased the gap again, and it has been disproportionate rather. As a result, the developed world has made far more usage of such digitization as compared to the poor and the downtrodden population living in the developing countries or the emerging markets. Thank you.